This communication addresses microlith variability during the early later Stone Age through the analysis of lithic assemblages from 3 sites located in northern Algeria. These sites are regionally disparate and they are characterized by different microlith types. This material culture variability is explored through the lens of chain opératoire, the integration of typological, technological, and morphometric analysis allow for a better understanding for the site function. North Africa, the latest Paleolithic industries corresponding to the terminal Pleistocene have been labeled as Ibero-Mauritian for the Maghreb and Eastern Iranian for Cyrenaica. The term of LSA microlithic industries was recently suggested instead of Ibero-Mauritian for labeling terminal Pleistocene assemblages that share an abundance of beaked and retouched bloodlets that appear to be largely focused on in coastal zones of North Africa. Human remains associated with the very earliest beaked bloodlet industries in the Maghreb are assigned to a very distinctive and modern human, so-called Meshta. Earliest LSA microlithic industries appeared at Tamarhat at least 25,000 years KLBP. For a period of some 10 millennia, the stone tools industry of North Africa were dominated by microlithic beaked bloodlets and were synchronous with several paleoclimatic events. Have human population been affected by the paleoclimatic changes? And how these changes have influenced the organization of their microlithic production systems. Almost all scholars who have to deal with North African beaked bloodlets use SAfA Paleolithic typology to describe them. The typology was explicitly morphological in intent and it's now very widely used in North Africa. This list is successful because this type, in my mind, because the types of beaked bloodlets that TICSI defined have correlates into the archaeological records, and it provides an explicit and widely used definition for beaked bloodlets. And third and lastly, it has been usefully applied to light Paleolithic, Epipaleolithic industries from Sinai, southern Sudan, and so on. In the Maghreb, the morphological variability of microlithic tools has been interpreted to represent distinct cultural communities. This interpretation relates back to the main debate about microlith variability, referring to chronological dates and typological list comes so that implicitly several regional facies which maintain a diachronic relationship. Conversely, Brahimi and Omersip designed a model leading to the identification of regional groups independent from chronological phases, whereas Close assumed that there is a noteworthy stylistic continuity, which is a key factor in the variability of beaked bloodlets. But since the 80s, linear conception of comps is increasingly rejected by many scholars who see the Ibero-Mauritian as a set of cultural facies with regional particularities, in which the environment is a major factor determining the economic and technical choices of Ibero-Mauritian populations. Systematically produced, microbloodlets are a hallmark of the Ibero-Mauritian, and up to now, researchers in the Maghreb have focused primarily on issues of cultural history, in which question of culture, origin, and typology are foremost. Variability in the Ibero-Mauritian lithic assemblages still remains essentially guided by the variation of typological tools, of which beaked bloodlets are abundant. However, variability can be deepened on the function of the site, the excavated area, and for the beaked bloodlets of the rate of fragmentation. While the distribution and variability remains an important variables to track, we direct attention to issues involving the role of microlithic technology in adaptive strategies, and the objective is to outline some avenues for reflection on the question of variability, focusing on lithic production systems by using a technological approach. Through the lens of the chaîne opératoire, every tool, of course, is a product of a system, a technological system rooted in a contextual, cultural context. Choices made by the developers were recognized throughout the co-reduction, processing, and transformation of produced blanks, as well as the research of debitage methods. Differences in intent and function are an important factor in contributing to the artifact function. And the recognition of damage patterns characteristic of hunting has significance for reconstructing subsistence behaviors. Back to the sites, Tamarhat and Russell are caves, both in a mixed landscapes of mountain, forest, and coastal plains, while Columnata is an open-air site on the high inland semi-plateau arid, far about 2 kilometers from the sea. At Tamarhat Rock Shelter, population practiced selective hunting directed primarily towards Barbary sheep in late autumn and early winter. At Russell, information are lacking, and for Columnata, the occupants frequented the site in late summer and early autumn, and the population practiced hunting oriented towards Al-Salafus. Lithic assemblages of Tamarhat belong to the western sector towards the front of the wreck shelter excavated by Saxon. The excavated area includes 85,700 grouped into 6 stratigraphic zones dated between 20,000 and 16,000 years BP, while lower layer of Russell is dated on snail shells by 14,000 years BP, and Columnata is dated on lacustrine shells by late 10,000 years BP. All phases of co-reduction are well represented, and the transformation of blanks took place at the sites. And the abundance, of course, of the artifact is a major asset for the reconstruction of technical behavior of human groups during this period. There is a massive production, of lamellar blanks, of which a large amount is retouched into Beckett bloodlets. And tools are largely dominated by lamellar blanks, often transformed into Beckett bloodlets. Did the management rules of microlith production system remain unchanged all this time? The results of the technological analysis tend to prove otherwise. The neppers of Tamarhat exploited, for the most part, siliceous rock available as pebbles, which were collected in the local alluvium and marine deposits. The same raw material procurement strategies were preserved throughout all the occupations, and also at lower layer of Russell. In contrast, the neppers of Columnata favored local voluminous blocks manufactured on 2 kinds of chalcedony, even if they were not satisfactory. The maintenance of the raw material procurement strategies is similar and indicate a recurrent territorial organization and reduced mobility as well. The blanks of Tamarhat were mainly produced by implementing a single and complex chain opératoire of lamellar production, which integrated unidifferential blanks deriving from the same chain opératoire. The dominant scheme corresponds to an abundant debitage primarily oriented to produce bloodlets from reduced prismatic and supramidal cores with single striking platform, often generally faceted. Beckett blanks were extracted as end products by unidirectional convergent removals that progressively expanded to adjacent faces, that's giving a semi-tournant front. And the lamellar blanks from plein débitage are obtained using the mineral soft hammer percussion according to a shallow direction. This technique is well suited to the production of regular bloodlets in this context during plant dépitage. Production of rectilinear bloodlets intercalated with the production of longer bloodlets using the same Rosenau sequence is also known, while microbloodlets with a curved profile were produced from robust byproducts deriving from the same chain opératoire, considered typologically as hand-scrapers. Other robust byproducts were exploited as bloodlet cures, either by using the burying core technique on truncation or extracting curved bloodlets from the lower surface. In the upper occupations of Tamarhat, the semi-tournant débitage strategy occurring in previous occupation was abandoned in favor of a simple débitage which exploited the natural convexities of the core from a single and preferentially plain striking platform. The extracted lamellar blanks are medium-sized. The alternate débitage become scarce or rare, and the alternate débitage becomes scarce while the production of microbloodlets derived from hand scrapers cores disappears. Burying cores become scarce also and no longer have a truncation. Moreover, a new scheme appears which exploits the blocks well suited to the flint pebbles. This scheme is related to the production of irregular blades with irregular shape. The retouched tool assemblages at Tamarhat consist primarily of non-geometric microliths, which have high variability and derived from the various technological schemes previously cited. Selected lamellar blanks in the lower occupation are shorter and narrower, requiring an elaborate shaping out sequences. Metrical data of these microliths correspond exactly to the minimum size of rejected prismatic and subpyramidal cores. These microliths are massively retouched into Beckett bloodlets, acute Beckett bloodlets, preferentially with semi-abrupt and Ustetter retouch. Angular Beckett bloodlets are also encountered in the lower occupations in small amount. Microbloodlets and burying spalls produced from minority schemes are seldom retouched and are restrictive to the lower occupations. These microliths might have been produced for an incidental task. Beckett acute bloodlets with retouched beds are more common in the upper occupation. It's only from the upper occupations that new objectives appear, leading to the production of robust and elongated lamellar blanks with a slightly curved profile. They are preferentially transformed to acute Beckett bloodlets and to a less extent to partially Beckett bloodlets having a microburying scale. This coincides with the change in core reduction strategies beginning at the end of the late maximum glacial. Beckett acute bloodlets with retouched base are more common in the upper occupations, and this may be due to paring down the base for handling constraints. The scarcity of cross-abrupt retouch at the upper occupation is probably related to the selection of blanks that were narrower and thinner, thus requiring a slight reduction in width. Indeed, the recognition of impact damage patterns characteristic of hunting with shepherd's stone projectile are well attested throughout all the occupations, which validate the hypothesis of it's worth noting that the production of these robust and elongated Beckett bloodlets coincide with the change in core reduction strategies. The recognition of impact damage patterns characteristic of hunting with shepherd's stone projectile are well attested, as I said, which validates the assumption of, it's not hypothesis of the return from the hunt. This is in agreement with the archaeological analysis of mammalian assemblage. The existence of proximal and distal fragments involved elements mounted actually at the tip of the foreshaft. The proximal fragments can be introduced into this site. The proximal fragments can be introduced into the site as points still embedded in their shaft, whereas the distal fragments are contained in the game brought back to this site. However, major fragments may suggest that pieces were mounted on the site of a narrow foreshaft. Unfortunately, no organic component of hafts were discovered in the Maghreb. Does the coexistence of the supposed hafting types suggest variability within the same technical traditions? Or whether should we consider the question in terms of a variation of suitable size game mounting? Functional analysis of microliths is ongoing. The study, of course, is based on experimental and with my colleague and archaeological pieces. Here we outline preliminary results of one beaked bloodlets coming from belonging to the upper layers of Tamarhat. This beaked bloodlet shows microscopic polish patterns related to skin working preserved on this side opposed to the beaked edge. This leads to assume that there is no direct causal relationship between form and function, at least for Tamarhat and these beaked bloodlets. The selected short and narrow lamellar blanks are extracted at Russell from subpyramidal and prismatic cores. Selected blanks were intended to be transformed into beaked bloodlets, but partially beaked acute bloodlets using the beaked bloodlets were extracted from prismatic and subpyramidal cores at Russell. They looked for shortened and regular lamellar blanks detached from these cores, and the lamellar blanks are extracted as end products with using of course mineral soft hammer percussion. The alternate lamellar debitage is rarely attested, and the debitage conducted on bearing cores performed along the edge of the core is systematically prepared on a plane striking platform. The selected short and narrow lamellar blanks are extracted from subpyramidal and prismatic reduced bloodlet cores and were intended to be transformed into beaked bloodlets. The partially beaked acute bloodlets using the micro-Buren-Blau technique are numerous, and Ustataritash is also well represented. The presence of few fragments of narrow beaked bloodlets with impact damage confirms the return of the hafts in which they were embedded, and the presence of major fragments can be explained by the existence of two types of hafting. With the last site, with the onset of the Holocene, microliths of columnata were obtained from various schemes, some of which are reserved for a particular type of raw materials. The microliths are obtained either on prismatic or subpyramidal cores. With a broad surface debitage or on bearing cores mostly dihedral. Moreover, a carinated and globular debitage, which are two new schemes of debitage without ratinal processing, appeared for the first time in this site. The former is only applied to bloodlet cores on flint pebbles to produce short and wide microliths from a carinated debitage surface, while the latter is devoted to globular cores, napped without visible organization on large blocks of chalcedony. The existence of an autonomous debitage of plates and flakes is in stark contrast with methods known at the previous sites. Blades were obtained with hammer percussion, hard hammer percussion, and differently from a broad or narrow debitage surface, various flakes were detached from coarse napped according to three main schemes. Like lithic assemblages of the previous sites, those of columnar tesserae are rich in arched baked bloodlets obtained using the microburial technique. The occupants of this site looked for large and thick blanks for hafting purposes. This is in agreement with the TT distribution results, which indicate that samples from columnata are larger and thicker. The calibration of blanks, which were transformed to baked bloodlets, included bloodlets as well as flakes, and often used an abrupt to crust retouch. The robustness of the blanks involves the massive use of an anvil retouch. This is probably related to a particular type of hafting. Very few pieces have or show patterns of pressure retouch applied either for paring down the basal parts of the tips and the manufacture of baked edges. This is a technical feature exclusive to columnata assemblages. The return from the hand is evidenced by the presence of fragments with impact damage. The uniformity of wide thickness values of baked bloodless fragments at Tamarhat and Russell is very marked compared to columnata where robust pieces were preferred. This is likely due to the contrast of hafting. Thus, the massive blanks of columnata were probably intended to be mounted at the tip of the foreshaft. Yes. To conclude, regional and chronological variability in microlith forms has been interpreted to represent distinct cultural groups. However, the interpretation is challenged by our results, which indicate that microlith form was the result of different reduction strategies. Changes between early and late Ivory region are likely to be product of changes in timing of technique of co-reduction strategies, which is in turn were due to changes in hunting strategies. Thus, weapons design systems and hunting strategies are the prime agents contributing to the variability of these microliths. The different geographical areas seem to cover variable economical entities, which would suggest rather a new adaptation of the same population to different ecological niches. This is in agreement with the previous authors that the Iberian region is a set of cultural facies with regional variabilities. However, the maintenance of the same raw material procurement strategy, as well as the continuous use of microburial technique, blow technique, and the persistence of the use of mineral soft hammer percussion shows a diachronic continuity in the method of producing microliths and is a strong argument for cultural continuity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Latifa. Do we have questions? Steve?
Tixier's methodology, you say, has worked very well. Are there any projects or researchers that have problems with Tixier working in North Africa?
I try to answer in English, but okay.
Did everyone hear the question?
Tixier is the list of Tixier is very widely used by North African researchers and Levant as well. In Sub-Sahara, but I think that this list needs to be improved by using the technological approach, because we have to take into account the behavior, the gesture, and the choices. Because we see neighbors of columnata had the choice to go far away to seek after good varieties of flint. But they used chalcedony, which was not very good to net. But I don't.
Yeah, but when someone defines a triangle, everybody knows what that is, correct?
Triangle, triangle.
Lunates. How about
lunates. Okay, in epipaleolithic typologies, there are microliths. What we call about microliths is are all blanks of which the edge of one edge was baked. There are no geometric microliths except of segments, lunates.
Steve,
Yeah.
when you look on the Maghreb and in the Levantine typology, so you have Tixier, and then you have Jean Perrault, and after offered by yourself, which have a very systematic typology. So usually when you're speaking about lunate, or about curve-pointed blade, or other types, or barren point, or everybody more or less knows because it's a very systematic list, like a white point, so people know that it's I don't know, M31, or they know where is it in the list, and they can compare the list and find it both in Tixier typology, in Brision typology, and in offered by yourself. So
But what would happen if you had a lunate that was more than 50 millimeters long?
Good question. If it will be one, it's not a problem. because you always have varia, right? There is diver. We can also
let's say lunates.
We can terminate. I probably will put them inside the back, inside the group of the geometric blade or something like this. That's what I'll do, and I will explain.
You would call it the same.
I will add it to the list. If the list is ending, I don't know, 100, I will put it in 101 and explain to it. And I say, okay, in this region I have a new type, which is a large lunate. I think that that's what I will do by heart, by stomach, if you ask me.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I think one other thing that your data seem to show quite clearly, continuing on your comments, Steve, and the reply, is that one of the problems with arbitrary size cutoffs, the 50 millimeter length size cutoff for micro and macro,
I think, yes.
is we see with your data distributions, those your box and whisker plots, everything was under 45 millimeters in length.
Yes.
So in that distribution, we're including 5% material that's macrolithic in the microlithic category at every single one of your sites. So why do we not then just use the distribution of the data to show us what the assemblage composition looks like? Why do we need an arbitrary size cutoff?
If we take columnate assemblages, we have to take into account that there was an autonomous debitage of flakes, and because the edge is reduced. So we can have 9 millimeters, but at the beginning it was way wider because it was a flake or blade. So if we use just morphometric, we won't have an idea of the chaîne opératoire, and thus we cannot make differences between other assemblages to have a global idea about the skills of these makers. I think.
But does each piece not contain the information of its production process? Do we need to classify it as microlithic in order to study its process?
No.
Can we not tell from the piece itself and the cores how they were made?
99% of the case, no.
From a flake, you cannot tell.
Most of the case, like they're broken, they're braided, they are rolled, they are surface collection.
Right.
We're talking about statistics, basically, and we're talking about the fact that he put the line somewhere is not because he decided he liked the number 5. This is how the world reacts. I mean, the great majority of these types, this is where you can put the line.
Yeah.
Now, there's always diver, always tools that don't behave. We're not talking about machine-made, right? These are people producing flakes. So not everybody is good as an upper. You have a bad day, or you want to show off and produce a large one. But statistically, it behaves very well.
But it seems like with Latifa's data, the numbers she was presenting were mean values, not outliers. And in all of the cases, the mean value was 25 millimeters. So if the world behaves in a 50 millimeter way, why in North Africa do we have the mean behavior, not showing off or trying to do something idiosyncratic, but the mean modal behavior in North Africa is to produce things 25 millimeters in length?
You said not ask why.
I cannot about 25 millimeters because the blocks used by the nippers were collected in terraces and marine collected, and they are not bigger than 7.5 centimeters. So their reduced volume of the block initially reduced. So, par conséquent, consequently, the size of microliths will be reduced. But the question is that comparing to columnata, microliths were thinner and wider because chalcedony were collected not into the shape of pebbles, but brick blocks. So they had to gear the chain opératoire producing plaques, and then to obtain Beckett bladlets. So I mentioned that there are impact fragments, impact damage on microliths, and the reduced is related to constraints of hafting. I think the haft is a big question. We have to know why they produce that, for what purpose, I think.
Maybe one more thing. I think in the same time period in the southern Levant in Israel, the mean average of retouched tools is probably very similar. It's probably 25 millimeters and not 50, but that's one category of the chaîne opératoire, of the technology, because obviously it was produced in some cases from much larger blocks. So it may be a minority within the overall assemblage, but it's still the focus of the retouched tools will be that length, and not 50. And again, it depends what time period you're talking about in the frequency.
You need to remember that you're starting with a blend that is probably larger, and then all you cut it by microfluidic, you go by snap. The blend is originally larger, and you can make 2 lunates from one blade.
Last thing.
I think, yeah, when we're talking about these typologies and how you end up with, you know, a seuil.
A step.
A step, no,
A break.
a break, a seuil.
A limit.
A limit, yes. So a limit or averages and sizes, and you take this typology, you try to apply it somewhere else, and it doesn't work. I think what we're really pointing on here is something that can be used for this definition of microliths that you want to come to is would be this element of modularity. I think that would be important to pull out of this discussion where we're talking about, you know, these mean sizes that, of course, when we apply one typology to another region, well, it doesn't work. Well, it can work, but you have to modify it. But what is the cause of this systematization of a size would be the looking to make a modular type product, and I think maybe we could pull that out of this discussion. Maybe.
Do they have to be hafted to be used?
For modular projects, I don't know.
No, modular, yes.
It would be, the function would have to imply a very, very specific shape, and if that function is just, I don't know, related to the hand or to a haft, it's still related to the function.
Right, and now we're referring to retouched small tools. But the unretouched ones, do they have to be hafted to be used?
Yeah, it's a very important question.
It's true
that behind this question of microliths is the question of hafting, and if you have to remove in the same manche, I don't know the word manche, haft, in several times exactly the same size or not of microliths, and it depends what is the system of hafting, of course. But when it's clear here that the question of weapon is central, if you have one kind of weapon, this part is only one part of a whole system, and it explains very well why you have a size of microliths which is very normalized, because the weapons need it, particularly if it's arrows, for instance, and it seems that it could be arrows in that case.
But here, going back to Clément's point of much earlier in the previous session, is the emphasis on hunting derived from the fact that you did more macrofracture analysis on more pieces and fewer microware because it takes longer? Do we, is that a product of preservation? Do we know that hunting was necessarily more important here, or is it just that we have more hunting scars because more pieces were analyzed for them?
Experimental study is ongoing, but for Tamarhat, it is very easy to see that residues organisms were well preserved comparing to the other sites. That's why we have more. The analysis was more successful than the other sites. And as pointed close before that, because she studied without to her many things for ivory study. She pointed out that hunting is very difficult to understand because traces patterns were not preserved, and I think it's a big question.
Okay, with an air to move ahead, so we're not late for lunch. Just to reiterate, your definition of microliths in this talk was retouch tools, bladelets.
Bladelets.
Those are the two primary definitions of microliths.
So, if to sum up, I think that for the three cases, I can't say we can use the same term because there are many different chaînes opératoires. But the end products are so many different for columnata. So I think that using, until now, up to now, using microliths for baked microliths for North Africa is more useful than another term. I think it's my opinion.
Backed microliths. Yes.
Baked microliths. I agree.
Just for the record, just so we know each person's definitions. Thank you so much.
This communication addresses microlith variability during the early later Stone Age through the analysis of lithic assemblages from 3 sites located in northern Algeria. These sites are regionally disparate and they are characterized by different microlith types. This material culture variability is explored through the lens of chaînes opératoires. The integration of typological, technological, and morphometric analysis allow for a better understanding for the site function. North Africa, the latest Paleolithic industries corresponding to the terminal Pleistocene have been labeled as Ibero-Mauritian for the Maghreb and Eastern Iranian for Cyrenaica. The term of LSA microlithic industries was recently suggested instead of Ibero-Mauritian for labeling terminal Pleistocene assemblages that share an abundance of baked and retouched bloodlets that appear to be largely focused on in coastal zones of North Africa. Human remains associated with the very earliest baked bloodlet industries in the Maghreb are assigned to a very distinctive and modern human, so-called Meshta. Earliest LSA microlithic industries appeared at Tamarhat at least 25,000 years KLBP. For a period of some 10 millennia, the stone tools industry of North Africa were dominated by microlithic baked bloodlets and were synchronous with several paleoclimatic events. Does human population or have human population been affected by the paleoclimatic changes? And how these changes have influenced the organization of their microlithic production systems? Almost all scholars who have to deal with North African baked bloodlets use société Paleolithic typology to describe them. The typology was explicitly morphological in intent, and it's now very widely used in North Africa. This list is successful because this type, in my mind, because the types of baked bloodlets that TICSI defined have correlates into the archaeological records, and it provides an explicit and widely used definition for baked bloodlets. And third and lastly, it has been usefully applied to light Paleolithic, epi-Paleolithic industries from Sinai, southern Sudan, and so on. In the Maghreb, the morphological variability of microlithic tools which baked bloodlets are abundant. However, variability can be dependent on the function of the site, the excavated area, and for the baked bloodlets of the rate of fragmentation. While the distribution and variability remains an important variables to track, we direct attention to issues involving the role of microlithic technology in adaptive strategies, and the objective is to outline some avenues for reflection on the question of variability, focusing on lithic production systems by using a technological approach. Through the lens of the chaîne opératoire, every tool, of course, is a product of a system, a technological system rooted in a contextual, cultural context. Choices made by the nappers were recognized throughout the co-reduction, processing, and transformation of produced blanks, as well as the research of debitage methods. Differences in intent and function are an important factor in contributing to the artifact function. And the recognition of damage patterns characteristic of hunting has significance for reconstructing subsistence behaviors. Back to the sites, Tamarhat and Rassel are caves, both in a mixed landscapes of mountain, forest, and coastal plains, while Kolumnata is an open-air site on the high inline semi-plateau arid, far about 2 kilometers from the sea. At Tamarhat Rock Shelter, population practiced selective hunting directed primarily towards barbaricide in late autumn and early winter. At Rassel, information are lacking, and for Kolumnata, the occupants frequented the site in late summer and early autumn, and the population practiced hunting oriented towards Al-Salafus. Lithic assemblages of Tamarhat belong to the western sector towards the front of the wreck shelter excavated by Saxon. The excavated area includes 85,700 grouped into 6 stratigraphic zones dated between 20,000 and 16,000 years BP, while lower layer of Rassel is dated on snail shells by 14,000 years BP, and Kolumnata is dated on lacustrine shells by late 10,000 years BP. All phases of co-reduction are well represented, and the transformation of blanks took place at the sites. And the abundance, of course, of the artifacts has been interpreted to represent distinct cultural communities. This interpretation relates back to the main debate about microlith variability, referring to chronological dates and typological list comes so that implicitly several regional phases which maintain a diachronic relationship. Conversely, Brahimi and Omersip designed a model leading to the identification of regional groups independent from chronological phases, whereas Close assumed that there is a noteworthy stylistic continuity, which is a key factor in the variability of baked bloodlets. But since the 80s, Linear conception of camps is increasingly rejected by many scholars who see the Iberm region as a set of cultural phases with regional particularities, in which the environment is a major factor determining the economic and technical choices of Iberm region populations. Systematically produced, microbladlets are a hallmark of the Iberm region, and up to now, researchers in the Maghreb have focused primarily on issues of cultural history, in which question of cultural origin and typology are foremost. Variability in the Iberm region assemblages still remains essentially guided by the variation of typological tools, often